Congratulations, you got Raiden Shogun from her rerun banner, but now you gotta build her so you can get the most out of her and do huge numbers like this. And in this video, I will teach you how to build her, giving you a complete Raiden Shogun guide covering her kit, her talents, her best weapons, artifacts, constellations, and team comps. With that said, let's begin. Going over Raiden, she is a great universal battery that buffs party members' burst damage and can also deal some off-field damage with her elemental skill, and on top of that, she can deal hefty amounts of damage with her elemental burst. When you ascend Raiden, she gets energy recharge as her ascension stat, which is really good, and we'll go into that a little bit later. Going into Raiden's talents, you have her auto attacks. It's just your basic 5-string combo of normal attacks, however, Raiden does have a unique charge attack. That being said, the damage scaling is pretty poor and it's not what Raiden's known for. One important thing I want to say is that upgrading this talent does not increase your normal and charge attack damage when she's in her elemental burst state. Her elemental skill is an electro slash that spawns in the Eye of Stormy Judgment. The eye deals coordinated electro damage every 0.9 seconds and only occurs when you deal damage to an enemy. When I say it only occurs when you deal damage to an enemy, that means it won't work against shields and that a number must appear on the screen for the coordinated attack to happen. Also, her elemental skill grants everyone in the party with an elemental burst damage buff based on the energy cost of their respective burst. For example, at talent level 8, you get 0.29% elemental burst damage bonus per energy of the elemental burst. Also, a nice little bonus is that her elemental skill has infinite uptime, and a quick little tip for her elemental skill is to use her skill at the start of every rotation so that every party member gets the boost to their elemental burst damage. Speaking of elemental burst, here's Raiden's elemental burst. Raiden pulls the Musuo no Hitotachi from her Ubas and enters her burst state, infusing all of her attacks into electro damage, as well as transforming her into a one-hand sword user with crazy damage scaling, where all the damage dealt is calculated as elemental burst damage. Unfortunately, her elemental burst only lasts for 7 seconds, but in those 7 seconds, you can dish out a ton of damage. On top of the damage, you also generate flat energy for your team. What this means is that if your Raiden generates like 20 flat energy for your team, every person on your team will get 20 energy, and that's not affected by energy recharge. As you can see, the initial slash of Raiden's burst does the most damage. However, the combos that you do when she's in her burst state are nothing to sneeze at, as those can also do a lot of damage depending on how many resolve stacks you have. Now, what is resolve? Resolve is calculated by the amount of energy by party members through their burst, excluding Raiden. The scaling caps at 0.2 resolve per energy, meaning an 80 energy burst gives 16 resolve, where the max resolve is 60, and resolve is cleared 300 seconds after Raiden leaves the field. Ideally, you want to build up these 60 stacks of resolve before you pop Raiden's burst, so that you can do the most damage possible. To give you an example of how strong resolve is, at talent level 10, the damage increase is 7% for the initial slash and 1.31% for autos per resolve stack, which translates to 420% damage increase for the initial slash and 78.6% for autos at the max resolve stacks. And a nice little tip for Raiden's burst is to leave it for the end of your rotation so she can easily accumulate the max 60 resolve for the maximum damage output. While we're on the topic of resolve, her passive talent 1 rewards 2 resolve stacks when a party member collects elemental particles. This can only happen every 3 seconds, and it'll make it easier to gain all 60 resolve stacks before casting her burst. Now, Raiden's passive talent 2 is something that you have to get. It gives 0.6% more energy restoration, which is the flat energy earned for your team when in her burst, and gives 0.4% electro damage bonus for every point of energy recharge above the base 100%. This makes energy recharge more of an offensive stat, however, still does less damage than attack percent stats unless you have an engulfing lightning. Only then the two stats will deal roughly the same amount of damage. As for the order that you want to upgrade your Raiden's talents, you want to first focus on your elemental skills so that you can do the most damage possible and restore as much energy for your team. Then you want to focus on your elemental skills so that you can do some nice passive damage off field, as well as increase the elemental burst damage of your Raiden and everybody else on your team. And lastly, your normal attacks, if you decide to upgrade them at all. I recommend don't upgrading them, save your resources, because if you're using your normal attacks on Raiden, you're doing something wrong. Now that we know how Raiden's kit works, items. Now we can focus on choosing the best weapon for her. Luckily, she has both solid free-to-play weapons and gacha weapons. And starting us off is going to be the Catch, the free-to-play baseline weapon for Raiden. Get it to R5, it's super easy, you just gotta spend some time fishing. The Catch has decent base attack, reaching up to 510, and a solid energy recharge stat capping at 45.9%, which in conjunction with Raiden's second passive will increase her energy restoration and her electro damage bonus. And like I said, get this weapon to R5 since the passive will increase your burst damage by a whopping 32% as well as its crit rate by 12%, allowing you to just deal absurd damage. Next up is the Wavebreaker's Fin. Only consider this weapon if you have it R3. If you don't, the R5 Catch is stronger. It has the highest base attack in the game for a 4-star polearm, maxing out at 620. It has a nice little attack percent substat with a max value of 13.8%. The passive for this weapon is also pretty good. At refinement rank 1, the passive will give you 0.12% extra burst damage of the party's total burst cost, where a max of 40% extra burst damage can be achieved. This passive gets much better with refinements, at R5 being one of Raiden's best choices. The passive values double to 0.24% extra burst damage, and a max of 80% extra burst damage can be achieved. Now, another solid weapon is the Deathmatch. Only use this weapon if it's R4 or higher. Otherwise, the free-to-play R5 Catch is gonna be better. The Deathmatch has an alright base attack maxing out at 454, but it has a great crit rate substat maxing out at 36.8%. The passive for this weapon is pretty good with 100% uptime in battle. It grants 16% attack and defense if one opponent is nearby, and if there are 2 opponents or more, the buff is increased to 24% attack and defense. Moving on to the 5-star weapons, all of them are good and they are better than the R5 Catch. The first 5-star weapon that I want to talk about is the Skyward Spine. It has the highest base attack for a polearm, being 674, and it also has that energy recharge substat of 36.8%, triggering the Ascension Stage 4 passive for Raiden. The Skyward Spine's passive is also great for Raiden as it increases your crit rate by 8%, and the attack speed is increased by 12%, which will allow you to do more attacks in your burst. Overall, Skyward Spine is a very nice choice for Raiden. Now, for any polearm user in the game, Staff of Homa is always a great choice. It has a fantastic base attack of 608 with an absurd crit damage substat being 66.2%. The passive will also increase your HP by 20% and give you an attack bonus equal to 0.8% of your HP. Also, if your HP falls below 50%, the attack bonus is doubled. That being said, you probably won't benefit from the second part of the passive since Raiden has no way to lose HP like Zhao or Hu Tao. And saving the best for last, we have the Engulfing Lightning. Obviously, this weapon is best for her since it's her signature weapon. It has fantastic base attack of 608 and an energy recharge substat of 55.1%, triggering her Ascension Stage 4 passive, which will give her more electro damage. The passive is tailor-made for Raiden, giving her an attack increase equal to 28% of the energy recharge over the base 100%, where the max attack bonus is 80%. Also, you get 30% energy recharge after using your burst for 12 seconds. For more on Raiden's weapons, I will be posting a tier list within the coming week. With the weapons out of the way, it is time for the artifacts. For Raiden's artifact set, it should be a no-brainer. It is the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate set. Energy recharge on the 2-piece, converts energy recharge to burst damage percent on the 4-piece. It is literally just a equip and play, no caveats whatsoever. And a nice little perk to this set is it comes from the most resin efficient domain, as Shimenawa can also be farmed there. Now, unfortunately, if you don't have a 4-piece emblem set, there really isn't any other options that can even compare. If you're still in the process of farming, you can maybe use some mixed sets that give electro damage, such as the 2-piece Thundering Fury, burst damage, such as the 2-piece Noblesse, or even attack percent, such as Shimenawa or Gladiator. Before we move on to the main stats of the artifacts, I want to answer the common question: how much energy recharge is enough? And that really depends on your weapon choice. There's actually no set amount, there's only recommendations. But as a baseline, 200% should be good for most builds, but I would suggest trying to focus on getting enough energy recharge to use your burst on cooldown. Typically, getting more than 200% energy recharge is normal for Engulfing Lightning users, since only then the 2 stats will balance out and you won't really suffer from diminishing returns. Now, the main stat for your sands, you want to focus on getting attack percent, as it is the best in almost any situation for any weapon choice. That being said, with Engulfing Lightning, using an energy recharge recharge sands can give you similar damage. If you do have the engulfing lightning equipped, energy recharge isn't a bad main stat, as it'll produce similar damage to the attack percent sands. And for those of you like me with horrible luck when it comes to artifacts, you can use an energy recharge sands, but only if the substats on your energy recharge sands just are far superior than your attack percent sands. My recommendation is just to test them out. Moving on to your goblet, it should be no question that you want electro damage, since Raiden is all about doing electro damage. However, attack percent can wield you better damage only if your electro goblet substats are horrible. And for your circlet, you're going to want any crit stat. As always, focus on that 1-to-2 ratio between crit rate and crit damage. As for the substats for your artifacts, you want to focus on crit stats, then attack percent, then energy recharge, and then everything else. Moving on to Raiden's Constellations, how good are they and should you pull for them? To put it simply, only up to C3 is really good. C1 makes it easier to gain max resolve. C2 is the best constellation because Raiden's burst attacks now ignore 60% of the enemy's defense, obviously boosting her damage. C3 upgrades her elemental burst talent by 3 levels, which is nice since that's where majority of her damage comes from. And everything past C3 really only gives her supporting capabilities. Her C4 grants a 30% attack bonus for 10 seconds after her burst ends, and then her C5 gives her 3 more talent upgrades to her elemental skill, which will make it do slightly more damage, and her C6 essentially allows you to decrease the elemental burst cooldown of all your party members by 5 seconds by attacking in your burst. Overall, Raiden's perfectly fine at C0. She can clear all the content inside of Genshin, and if you really want to pull for Constellations, only do so up until C2 and C3 because that's where she gets her biggest damage increases. Now, some team comps for Raiden. I have 4 examples today. First one's going to be a mono electro team consisting of Raiden Shogun, Yae Miko, Bennett, and Kujo Sara. Raiden's obviously going to be your main damage dealer, and Yae is going to be more of a sub electro DPS. If you don't have Yae, you can substitute her for any other sub electro DPS, for example Fischl. And the reason we want an electro sub DPS is that we can build even more resolve stacks and generate more electro particles. Bennett's here for obvious reasons, healing and a huge attack buff, and Kujo Sara's here only if you have her C6, since that'll increase your crit damage for electro characters when you buff their attack with her. But if you don't have C6, you can opt out for Lisa, since she has defense shred, which will increase the damage for your whole team. Another team you can run is Raiden, Sara, Bennett, and Sucrose. Raiden being your main DPS once again, Sara providing an attack buff as well as a crit damage buff if you have her C6. If you don't have her C6, again, use Lisa for that defense shred, Bennett for healing and another attack buff, and Sucrose here. You can swap Sucrose out for any Animo character, the best ones being Kazuha and Venti, and their main role is going to be to decrease enemy electro resistance so that your Raiden Shogun can do the most damage possible. Another popular team is the Raiden National team consisting of Raiden, Xingqiu, Bennett, and Xiangling. Raiden being your main DPS once again, Xingqiu since he's an amazing sub DPS with some pseudo heals and his rain swords, which just are amazing, and you can proc electro charge with them. You got Bennett obviously for his healing and his attack buff, and Xiangling here since her Pyronado is just amazing, and the little pepper from Guoba is a nice little attack buff. Also with this team, you get the Pyro Resonance increasing your attack. And the last team I want to talk about is putting Raiden more into a battery and support role. On this team, our main damage dealers are going to be Raiden and Eula. So whenever Eula has off time, we pop into Raiden Shogun and use her elemental burst so we can funnel Eula's elemental burst, which is nice. Then you're going to want to have a healer or shielder, which is Diona, who's actually going to funnel particles for Eula, also providing you with that cryo resonance. And the last slot on this team is just a flex spot. You can put anybody and they will work perfectly fine here. There's lots of teams like this out there for main DPSs who have a lot of off time and have high energy requirements, mainly being Eula as you see here, and I've also seen some variations with Zhao out there. That being said, I do believe you'll get more value out of your Raiden by putting her on her very own team. That's gonna be it for this Raiden Shogun guide. Hopefully it helped you out. If it did, be sure to check out my other guides like this one right here. Also, do me a favor by smashing like and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.